Welcome to the Founding Voices podcast, a series of conversations with the humans who showed up before there was a map. I'm Perry, the founder of the Octopus Movement, and I believe nonlinear thinking is not just a way of creating possibilities, it's a way of being in the world. Each week, I speak with three founding members from our global human mycelium to explore who they are, why they think differently, and how they're shaping a future that can be built in straight lines. Let's meet today's guest. I'm really honored to have Anshar Seraphim here, a thinker whose mind literally rewrites the rules of connection. Anshar is a high stakes negotiation trainer, behavioral science expert, writer, and consultant who bridges psychology, neuroscience, and communication to help individuals, teams, and organizations to see people more deeply and connect more powerfully. What makes Anshar truly distinctive is not just what he knows, but how he thinks, connecting seemingly unrelated ideas, challenging assumptions, and finding meaning where most people see noise. He's also lived experience of thinking differently. His cognitive writing gives him a unique lens on the world, including number synesthesia and a deep understanding of neurodiversity. This episode is a deep dive into thinking differently, communicating beyond convention, and the inner life of someone whose mind catches patterns others miss. Unsure. How about that as an introduction?
That's a lot of pomp and circumstance. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Unsure. So happy you're here. You're a founding member of the Octopus Movement, a real friend. I love working with you. We do a lot of things together in the Octopus Movement, and I'm so happy to interview you so I can share with the whole world how awesome you are as a human, as a friend, not how awesome you are because you're so intelligent and so smart. I really like you as a human. So let's explore that and let's show that to the world. First questions first, Answer. I always ask this question first is what do you see and how do you see your inner octopus? Describe your octopus for us.
Well, I have total aphantasia, so my inner octopus is an outer octopus. But I think one of the probably the most interesting things, or at least people find it interesting, it's just me my whole life, is I actually encode text on surfaces visually in order to speak. I was 75% nonverbal at age 11, so I had to come up with my own system for being able to speak, and I started reading at about 2 years old, but I didn't really start speaking, you know, fully until I started to move closer to my teens. It was very strange for me, when I was sitting down with just one person, I'd be able to have a conversation, but then I would go to school or I would be at a restaurant or something, and I found myself unable to talk, and it was a real long journey for me to figure out why that was the case. So I don't know if you're familiar with this thing in psychology and linguistics, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, but it's this idea that the way that we acquire language changes the way that we think. You don't really think about it a lot of times unless you're, maybe a polyglot, but you go to an ancient language like, I don't know, like Sanskrit, I'll have like 42 different words for love. And then in American English, we have one word for love and 42 idioms for the act of vomiting. So the ability to,
What happened
uh,
there, right?
yeah, what your ability to think about different concepts, how you experience them changes based on your language. And for me, because I generate text to speak, and I had to take a bunch of pictures of my face to learn facial expressions. I have to annotate tone, gesticulations, all of that in a string. And then it started really slow because I only read like 120 words a minute to start, um, and then I had to be able to look at that text and then try and give people eye contact and do stuff like that in order to be able to communicate with people. Eventually, that reading speed started getting faster and faster, especially from literally reading everything I say. So that changed over time, but yeah.
So not being verbal, would that be something positive for you in creating more space to think differently? Is that too simple to think that way?
I mean, it's just about difference. It's not about necessarily better. Or I mean, if you talk to a person who maybe has a deprivation of a certain sense, like maybe blindness or something, sometimes we like to think that their other sensors are more developed. But I think that any sense that you focus on, whether it's occupationally or day to day, that you start to learn to extract different information from it. And I think the way that the brain processes information and the way that it experiences neuroplasticity speaks to that. That once you start becoming trained at observing, I think we all have this experience if we go to like a job or something where maybe we deal in sales or we see a person walk in every day. Um, we start to be able to read their body language because we've been in this particular case. It's not that we become body language experts in all of life, but
You
we start to
recognize things, right?
when a person comes into, let's say, your store,
Yeah.
you start to recognize the state of mind that they're in for that particular reason. And I think that it's like that, but it gets wider and bigger the longer that you do it. So there's certainly merit to the idea that you become more attuned to things, whether or not it's your actual sense changing or just the way that you're processing it. Probably need more
Mhm.
data on that.
Yeah. So let's dive into the different thinking. Um,
Hmm.
so thinking for me, and I'm just a simple individual, neurons are connecting with each
Trying to
other,
make your way through the
firing away.
galaxy.
That's it, right? Um, just these neurons, sending electricity to each other, making connections. And for me, that's thinking. And now you're a master of thinking differently. So, what do you think is happening in your brain different than is happening in the brain of a regular individual, wherever on the planet?
Well, we use the thinking style that works best with the way that we are. And
Mhm.
for me, because I do think in text, it's a lot easier for me to use different kinds of methods that work better in text. So I don't know if you've ever seen like a
But
metagraph.
wait a second. I want to understand this so well, Answer. You say you think in text.
Yeah,
What does that mean? Because I think most of us are saying that, well, I think in text, right? Because I hear text when I think, but that's maybe not the same as what you
I,
have.
I, I literally have a blank space on the screen and my brain generates subtitles for the things that I'm about to say. I generate an entire paragraph ahead of time. So I'm not extemporaneously saying things like you would normally expect to in a conversation. So there are literally multiple sentences in front of me right now, like I'm reading a teleprompter, and my brain is generating those for me to be able to speak.
I can have situations where I'm thinking, what the hell am I saying? That it's the gut feeling takes over and I start talking and it's like alien possession. This is weird and I don't think and yet I communicate. How does that work with you? Is it always visible what you're going to say, or is it a combination?
Well, I have because I have sensory processing disorder, there's kind of a confounding variable there because it's part of my language generation. Like, let's say I'm typing something. If
Mhm.
someone starts talking to me, my brain can only do one or the other. I don't have the ability to do both things at the same time. If someone just says a sentence to me, I'll completely lose where I'm at, and I have to kind of reconstruct what I'm typing. When I'm speaking, it's a little bit easier because I've trained myself to in advance to see the entire paragraph that I'm going to say, and then I'm looking away from that, kind of like reading a teleprompter. So I'm reminding myself of my lines and then trying to give the eye contact and do everything else that I'm doing. So I get a little bit less disruption there when I'm speaking, just because I've started to widen that gap. But and I don't know if anyone's ever had this experience. If you're curious what it's like, but if you've ever had a cell phone call where the connection is a little bad and so you start to hear yourself but like on a 1 or 2 second delay, just that 1 or 2 second delay will actually make you unable to talk, because when you start processing your own voice at a different synchronization, it scrambles your ability to talk. It's like that. When people ask me about sensory processing disorder, if they don't really know what that's like, I think if we've all had the sensation of maybe like having to turn down the radio to park. But imagine you reach for the radio and the volume's stuck at 11 and there's no knob, and then you have to park anyway. And then the second that anything else starts happening, then a second radio channel goes on, and then a third. That's kind of what sensory processing disorder is kind of like.
Yeah.
But to speak to your original question, there are methods of thinking that you can use, a little bit more deterministic, which is nice. Things like a metagraph or a hypergraph, formal concept analysis, truth table. You can use neurohierarchical symbolic rule induction. You can use causal discovery. You can use, there's so many cool reasoning systems that you can use when you're thinking in text that can actually make it really interesting to think. And I think that's one of the reasons that I do think differently. But then also, and I think a lot of people on the spectrum have this experience, I can only speak for myself, but everything is connected. Literally everything is connected. So it's not that I store things in a file box like most people do. It's kind of like when you're putting an electric current on two sides of a piece of wood, and then you start to see those black branches go out until it can find that path of least resistance. It's like that when I think. So I don't have to store information in the normal way. It's already connected. It's also one of the reasons I smoke close cigars when I'm on like a video call or something like that, because it turns off my sense of smell and my sense of taste, so that I'm not constantly retrieving memories.
More input, even.
Yeah, because that's even more noise.
Let's discuss autism here, and nonlinear thinking. I'm curious about something.
Okay.
You just said you're on the spectrum, Anshar, and people listening to us or looking at us like, really? Is he on the You're on the spectrum, and you're an awesome example of how cool it can be to be on the spectrum. Or am I saying something ridiculous now?
Okay, so there's a few things to pull apart there. It is easy when we look at people who have cognitive difference, and depending on the amount of challenges that they have, to look at something like autism as a superpower, or to look at entrepreneurs and say, oh well, so many entrepreneurs have ADHD, it's a superpower, and that can be very dismissive because it is a spectrum, and and we have over the course of psychology, especially as the evolution of the DSM has gone along, we've taken a lot of different conditions and putting them together on the spectrum. And there are people who have really high support needs. There are a lot of, as a developmental disorder, there are a lot of things that go along with it on the same gene. Like when I was born, one of my eyes was turned all the way into the inside of my eye as a strabismus, and I had to have it corrected with surgery. There's all kinds of conditions that can be on the same gene, everything from dysautonomia, gastroparesis, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. There's so many things. Plus, there's a lot of vision things that can go on the same part of that spectrum, everything from convergence insufficiency, which can falsely flag as dyslexia. A lot of people who are on the spectrum or have ADHD don't realize that they're not actually dyslexic. They have a convergence insufficiency because you can see some of the same issues with things like reading, and until you differentiate the differences, as though convergence insufficiency can actually be fixed with eye exercises versus dyslexia, that takes a whole different approach. So I think that I have a duty as a person who went through that experience of being mostly nonverbal, and now I'm able to speak. I have a duty to speak up for those people who have really high support needs, because otherwise, as a cognitive outlier, people can look at me and say, oh, well, autism's a superpower.
Is that too simple, Anshar? Is it too flat in a way, too not elegant enough to say, okay, when you do well and you're on the spectrum, it's just a superpower. Look at Anshar. He understands everything. He has an IQ of God knows how much.
Well, remember, we wrote a paper on the speciousness of intelligence, but we'll talk about that later. But I think the thing that's important is that when we look medically at a diagnosis, right, there's a reason that there's certain diagnostic criteria there for treatment and to be able to understand. What happens, though, I think, is that when people have symptoms that present as character traits, so if you happen to have maybe you have severe ADHD, and so some things can be very difficult for you, or you have autism and you have other things that go along with it, then you're basically mistreated for things socially, for things that you have no control over for a very long period of time. So when you get a diagnosis, especially if you don't get it until later on in life, it can feel like a vindication because a bunch of people have been basically assigning a bunch of personality traits to you. And then to realize that it's something that's beyond your control, there can be a big social relief in that. And there can be a desire, despite the fact that it's a medical diagnosis, to use it as a personal label. The issue with that, though, is that if I tell you I've got autism, let's say, the only thing I'm really doing is inviting you to use whatever definition of autism you have, whether that's Rain Man or your cousin Steve, and then to put that on me. It's much better to talk about things in terms of what they look or sound like. And that's the difference between personal identity and medical diagnosis. And I think sometimes that problem of getting that relief from getting a validation of a diagnosis, that can end up pushing itself into social situations. And maybe that's not the right place for it, but I understand it. You know, that's why we hold on to, like, well, older people, I would say older people in the community and autism will hold on to words like Asperger's, because that was, you know, that got added to the DSM in like 94, 96. And for, you know, during that time period when someone got that diagnosis, they're like, oh, that's why I'm having all this frustration. So then they want to tell people, oh, you know, I have Asperger's. But you know, when you meet someone with autism, you just met someone with autism. That's it. You can't
right?
replace them. Yeah, it's like saying
Yeah.
someone with cancer.
And what I find interesting with you, Anshar, is that, and with a lot of people on the spectrum in the Octopus movement, that I always had the idea that being on the spectrum means that it's all very linear, right? Your cup for your coffee needs to be this cup in my case, and my tea needs to be in this cup, and you know, everything needs to be in place, and everything needs to be organized in the right. But I discovered that a lot of people on the spectrum are very nonlinear, and they're very happy in the Octopus movement because we're not talking about autism.
So
We're not
remember what
mentioning
I said about
this.
symptoms and character traits? So if you have sensory processing disorder, then certain things are going to bother you, certain textures, certain fabrics, you know, a tag on the back of your shirt, a particular kind of food. So we end up developing sensory preferences. And then another thing that can go along with being on the spectrum, depending on how it manifests in you, is you can have inflexible thinking, or you can take things literally. Not like a kleptomaniac, like take things literally. And so you have that part of it where we can really appreciate structure, because structure allows you to anticipate your sensory input. But that's
And
not the
that's
same as
very
thinking.
important. That's not the same as linear thinking, right?
Yeah,
And I think
thinking
there's
and how you
yeah.
navigate life aren't necessarily the same. In fact, and this is, I think, one of the biggest takeaways I've gotten from studying psychology. Have you ever heard of something called a nendophasia?
No.
So nendophasia is, it's like 5 to 10% of people, and it's the lack of an internal narrative. You don't have a
Oh
narrator in your
yes.
head.
Yeah, we
So,
talked about that before.
and
Yeah.
I think that the reason that this is so important as a takeaway is that too many of us think that what's going on in our head is us. That's our brain narrating what's going on, but that doesn't have to be identity. Um,
Yeah.
and the fact that some people don't even have that narrator, I think, supports that. And I think you have to take it to an edge case and abstract it to really know how true it is. But let's say you're in love. You know, you could think about being in love with someone every day, uh, have tons of wonderful thoughts about them. But if you don't have any manifestation of that in your behavior, are you in love? If it's not changing your choices, are you in love? You know, there's a big difference between thinking and believing and doing. And I think that who you are as a person is what you choose to do on a regular basis. And
Hmm.
as a result, you know, especially people who have higher intelligence spend a lot of time internally. So they have a rich internal world of thinking about things. And that can lead to over processing identity when really your identity is what you choose to do. It's a funny thing to reference, but I don't know if you ever played a game called Skyrim. There's this dragon on the top of a mountain named Parthenax, and the player is faced with this kind of moral quandary of, do I kill this dragon because dragons are inherently evil? Are you are you evil because of what you think or because of what you choose to do? Is it better to be born good and to only know good and to only choose good because you didn't know that there was another option? Or is it better to be born with evil impulses and to choose to do good things?
To
Um,
choose
we
good, right?
Yeah, so
Is the
it's
good
not about
better? It's the
internal, it's
it
external.
is the good better answer when you choose the good.
Yeah, and I think that the way that you choose to act, the way that you choose to respond, it's only 1% what happens to you and 99% how you choose to react to it. And I think if more people owned that, that we would live a different inner life. And I think that that's important.
Let's play with this because I know you love the game Two Things to Connect.
Oh God. Okay.
And
Yeah.
let's dive into this. To choose good. If yeah, we don't have to explain. Let's find two words that I'm going to ask you to connect with each other, and it's in this same area. What about conflict and curiosity?
Okay. Well, conflict makes me think of the Duns Scotus paradox, where we have two choices and no way to lean back and forth. The brain creates bias through conflict. Um, Conflict is also the only way that you can grow. No growth occurs without challenge. Where neuroplasticity comes from. So, in order to make good choices, you have to invite conflict. If you're surrounding yourself with people that are siloed in that same way of thinking as you, then you never get to hear a contrary opinion. I think one of the most useful things that you can do if you find someone that you disagree with is to switch positions with them and see if you can argue their point. See if you can follow their steps, even if you don't agree with their conclusions. So if you take the time to understand a person's steps, then you'll understand their choices. And sometimes you find that the thing that you're arguing about is either semantics or sometimes it's something deeper. Like, I hear this in the States a lot. People argue about something like the death penalty. And you could spend all day going back and forth about whether or not uh, someone can do something wrong enough to warrant killing them. But in a system where we can make mistakes, where people can be falsely imprisoned, where we have news headlines where a forensic scientist has falsified a bunch of reports, especially in an adversarial system, you have to consider the possibility that we could kill the wrong person. And whether or not we can agree whether or not someone could do something bad enough to warrant killing them, I think we can both agree that uh, killing an innocent person is wrong. So sometimes you can find a different thing to talk about when that happens.
Is it this journey? I'm so happy we recorded this, Answer, because this shows how your brain works. We went from conflict to curiosity in such a smooth way. It's so elegant. It's like a wave, and it starts with conflict, and you go to curiosity, and not like and now there's curiosity. It goes into that, and it's really beautiful. Let's do another one. Can we do another one,
Sure,
please?
sure. And Dr.
Oh,
Cheryl, I only smoke them on video because the mentholated sugar-free cough drops that I use, they make a bunch of clicking sounds against my teeth. If I try to do that on a
exactly.
web, that's not going to work. I just have to turn off the sense of
Thank you,
smell and taste.
Cheryl, for
I
saying
could
this.
bite an onion beforehand, but I'm allergic to onions. That might be a bad idea. But yes,
Let's not
don't
do
don't
that.
smoke, kids.
No, don't smoke. By the way, no, not by the way. Um, let's do another one. Two
Okay,
things
sure.
to connect. I love this. Music and decision making.
Okay, so decision making can be about tempo. And when you're thinking, you're going to be thinking in a key. When you change something to a minor key, you can make it sad. When you change something to a major key, you can make it feel more upbeat and profound. When you're confronted with a challenge, you have an opportunity there. Every challenge is an opportunity in disguise because it's an opportunity for you to see how important your values are, um, to grow, to make it so that the next time a problem like that happens, that you have the ability to have good epistemic humility and be existentially authentic. Um, it's an opportunity. Every challenge is an opportunity, and I think that using and leveraging the change in tempo can be important. What would happen if this sad song I'm experiencing right now was in a different key? You can take a song like Happy Birthday and put it in the minor key, and it'll make you want to cry. So the way that you choose to react to and have authenticity toward the things that are coming at you, those things define you. And if you run away from something, you can be doing that your whole life. But when you turn around and face it, it transforms you. And you got to decide, you got to make those decisions, be your own engineer. How do I want to be transformed by this?
I love this. Thank you, Anshar. While we're doing this, I'm thinking, okay, 30 minutes is never enough. We knew this in advance, right? I want to invite you to something. I want to do a Perry Anshar conversation of 30 minutes once every 2 weeks or something. We just need to create a special series. Can we do that, Anshar?
Yeah.
I would
30
love that.
minutes is just about enough for me to rant about what I've been doing the last week. So,
Considering time, we're going into the last questions.
hey,
You
Perry,
know, I
did you
love.
know? Did you know that every 75 to 90 minutes, a banana emits a particle of antimatter?
That's what I say. We need to create a series to drive everybody nuts and really really go for it. Someone is saying a series is a fantastic idea. I think it's a very good idea to do a series, just Perry and Answer talking about all kinds of stuff, and maybe do more two things to connect things and discuss so many things that are happening in the world. But let's let's finish this one first. The introduction to Answer as a founding member to the Octopus Movement. Answer, you know, I love nonlinear thinking. I drive everybody nuts with that. Here's Perry, linear, nonlinear. Um, in your perspective, how is nonlinear thinking connected to success in the world?
Well, I think that a lot of people get into this problem of identity. Like you'll see entrepreneurs and they try and sell themselves, which I think is a kind of a bizarre idea. Um, I think that when you're trying to offer a product or a service or a value proposition, that you got to focus on the people who need it, and then find out what it is that they need, where they live, and then figure out what's different about you so that you can make the way that you do that better, special, different, unique. And it can also keep you from getting into cultural traps too. I think one of the things that I see most often is you'll see like this little siloed thinking of like maybe a bunch of engineers, they come up with this cool product. But because they're all engineers, they all kind of think the same. They're all convinced by the same things. If you want to convince an engineer, you give them facts and data and numbers and but the people who need what you do the most are the people who are least like you. And I think that's something that people need to understand, that if you've got, maybe you're a systems thinker, then the person who needs you the most is a person who is
Who's not a system
disorganized,
thing, right?
who
Yeah.
who's focused on their social relationships, on their emotions. So you have to be able to translate the benefit to them and hit them where they live. We all start with this idea of the golden rule, treating other people the way that you want to be treated. And that's great when you're meeting a stranger. Try to project some basic rights and ethics onto that person. But from that moment going forward, you move to the platinum rule. How do I treat that person the way they need to be treated? Because if you, and this is the most common human mistake that I see, is to take another person's behavior or communication, and then your brain says, well, if it was me doing that, I would be doing it for XYZ reasons. So that must be why they're doing it. And at that point, you're just invalidating an entire other person's humanity. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that we can all learn to do better. And when we fail to do that, it causes really big failure. And to that point, failure is powerful. Fail upward, fail often, fail
It would be
enthusiastically.
so nice if we would be trained to do that at school, right? To
If you don't
celebrate failure.
constantly put yourself into a position to fail, how are
You're,
you going to grow?
nothing is happening. Yeah. Final question, answer. Um, do you have a message or an invitation to all the nonlinear listeners to this?
there could be a desire to wait an arbitrarily long period of time to tell the people closest to you how you're different. But that's not for them, it's for you. It's selfish, it's insecure, because the time that it's best to tell people how and why you're different is when you first meet them and that energy is super high, when they're still learning how to place you and how to treat you. We fall into this insecurity of not wanting to talk about how we're different until we trust someone. But if you think about it from the other point of view, you're taking a person who wants to be close to you and letting them go 6 months, however long, whatever the arbitrarily long thing is in your head, feeling stable, like they have a good understanding, and then you're changing all of the rules after that. Think about what that experience might be like. When you learn to positively, not negatively, not apologize, but positively share the way that you're
Positively in
different.
the beginning, when all the energy is right, the music is positive, right? There are happy notes, and
Because I'll tell
we
you,
talk
I go
about
into
it.
a call and I'm with these people, brand new connections, and I say, hey, I think a little bit differently. I can info dump. That happens. Just hold up a finger. Let me know. I really care about what you have to say. I just get lost in an idea, and then immediately the thing that happens right after is they'll tell you how they're different, whether they're
Yeah.
neurotypical or not. Oh, I'm really bad with metaphors, or man, I get really distracted by music. Or if someone comes into the room, please mute your microphone. It's super
And do you
distracting.
prefer answer to say I info dump easily rather than I'm Anshar and I have autism?
Well, like I said, you tell someone you have autism, the only thing you've told them is a word, and then you're just
Yeah.
inviting them to use whatever definition of that word they have. Communication's about the other person. What do you need to do so that they understand? And if
It's
you focus
selfish
on
to
that,
just say the label, right? In a way.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do that
Interesting.
with other diagnoses and stuff. But like I said,
No.
it's about identity.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Perry. I'm stupid. It doesn't work
Stupid
that
is
way.
as stupid does. Back to behavior.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Answer. Thank you for being here, not just in this podcast, but in the movement as a founding member, as a good friend, as our different thinker in the movement. If you're listening and you feel a spark, follow it, please. Nonlinear thinking is not a strategy, it's a kind of love, and it grows where we share it. Thank you, Ansher, for being here. And let's do this. Let's create a whole series of conversations between Ansher and Dr. Octopus.
And
Thank
if
you,
you ever
Ansher.
want to call with me, you got a copy to my electronic business card on my LinkedIn. You can just click there, and all kinds of different ways of
Just
getting a hold of
connect with
me.
Ansher. Please do. Thank you, Ansher. See you
Always.
next time.